Wait, what's the $20,000 at stake here? Right. Um, so his logic is that he's worth more dead than alive. Right. Which is pretty tragic logic. It's also very flawed logic. I don't know if they had this when this was written or not, but generally speaking, life insurance policies won't pay out if it's deemed a suicide. So don't do it for the money, y'all. um, it's not that's not a solution. At least nowadays, insurance companies very often will not pay out life insurance if it's deemed a suicide. So kind of know that. And get help if you're feeling suicidal, please. I don't mean to laugh at that topic. Um, so let's make sure that we're thinking about mental illness in terms of the depression he's facing. I mean, people aren't suicidal for no reason. What's led him to this place? Other than brain chemistry aside, what has led him to this place? Right. What are we thinking about when we're thinking about sales? Has anybody worked in sales? Worked on commission in particular? What's that like? Right. And if you don't make the sales, you don't make the money, right? So that's a hard way to make a living, right? It's a very hard way to make a living. Um, what was he selling? Does anybody know what products he sold? It doesn't even really say. But let's think about what sales, talking about salesmen here. But what we're probably looking at is somebody who was a door-to-door salesman. What does that mean? We don't really have very many of these anymore, but what does that mean? Yes. Has anybody here ever encountered a door-to-door salesman? What's that like? Uh-huh. Right. It can be actually pretty dangerous if people don't want to be bothered, right? It was a little more common. There were fewer department stores and things like that. So people definitely would buy things from a traveling salesman if the product was good, etc. And you would have a territory and you would travel in that territory, but you'd have to travel because if they'd bought your product, they're probably not going to buy it again, right? They're going to have the product, and so then you'll need to expand your territory. So he travels a lot for this job. He's probably, trying to do more pitches than he's making sales by a lot, right? Anybody who's worked in sales knows that you're going to be pitching it. You're not necessarily going to be making the sale, right? Um, car salesmen, right, um, are going to have to talk to a lot more customers than they can get to drive away in a car, right? That's why they never want you to leave the lot. They want you to buy that car. You're not going to, they don't like it when you say you're going to go home and think about it, right? And they're like, no, 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 no. Let's put you in this car today, right? And that's because they're trying to meet their goal for the day. They're trying to meet their sales goal for the day, right? Um, and that's why, has anybody here ever felt pressured by a salesperson? We're all like, yes. What do you do in that situation? Nod your head and walk away. You're so polite. Other responses? What do you do when you're pressured? All right, so you're a negotiator, but you're also a salesman, so you kind of know, you know the deal, right? Other responses to the hard sells that we've had? Macy, how did you get the guy to leave or girl to leave? Mm-hmm. Yep. Other responses to the people who've come to your door? Who else has had someone come to their door? Yeah. Just like, nope. Yeah. Yeah. My standard line is, "I'm all set. Thank you. I'm all set. I'm all set." And I do it with people who are trying to sell me on their religion as well. I tell them I'm all set. But I'm all set. Yeah, or in when we first moved into our neighborhood, the Baptists came by to make sure we were coming to the right church. Um, I told them we were all set to. That's fine. They were trying to be welcoming. I don't have a problem with it. They're friendly people. I did have one problem. I don't really even know what group they were because I wouldn't let them talk to me. Um, but when my kid was like a baby, like a couple of weeks old, they kept ringing the bell like every afternoon. I'm like, I just had a baby and you keep waking her up and I'm gonna kill you now. I was like, because the dog would bark and they'd go crazy. And I had said, really, stop ringing the bell. The baby's sleeping. We're not interested. No. So finally, like the last time they did this for like 2 weeks, like every other day for 2 weeks. I had a dog who would like lunge toward the door and bark. If I'd let her out, she would have like jumped around and licked them and, and tried to be their friend. But if I held onto her collar, she would like lunge and bite and she'd be all crazy. And so I finally said, if you ring the bell again, I'm going to let this dog out. And they didn't come back after that. So, but think about this. I know this is it's just a silly set of stories, but think about all the things that you've said that you've done to the people who've come to your door. And then put yourself in the position of somebody whose livelihood depends not only on you opening the door, but letting them do their sales pitch and then agreeing to buy something. And that's a hard life. That's a life full of frustration and anxiety, right? If day after day after day you have jerks like me telling they're going to let the dog out at you, that's frustrating, right? I mean, it's really frustrating. If your livelihood depends on that, it'll wear you down. And he's been good at it. This is the thing to remember. He's been good at it. He's raised a family doing this, right? But it's not working anymore, right? And he's not able to have the success he was having anymore, right? What's going on with his sons? Why are they're like adults? How old are these sons? And where are they living? Why? Uh-huh. Did he try real hard? Right. And I think that, in a lot of ways, the dad wants to continue to provide for his sons, but at some point, shouldn't they be providing for themselves? That's our goal as parents, is to have the children be adults. We want our children to be functioning adults at some point, hopefully by the time they're 35. We want to be a landing place. If things, I know that my parents, when my sister and her husband were moving from California back to the East Coast and they were looking for a house, they said, absolutely stay with us while you're finding your house. And then they found the house and moved back out, right? It wasn't like you can just come live here, right? That wasn't ever part of the deal, right? And that's, it's not wrong to live with your family generationally, right? And there's lots of people who do, like, they don't move out necessarily. They might move out when they get married, but they stay in the house until they're married, and that's fine. There are some who continue to stay, and then the grandparents and parents and grandchildren all live in the same house, and that's fine too. But if the person in charge of providing for that family doesn't start to get the contributing amounts, it becomes a greater and greater burden on that provider, right? And he hasn't had a break. If his kids are 34 and he's been doing this his whole life, shouldn't he be kind of close to being able to retire? And he can't, right? That's nowhere in sight, right? What's the economy like? Any sense of the setting of when this took place? All right, so between now and Wednesday, I want you to see if your Googling fingers can answer that question. When is it set? When is it supposed to have taken place, according to the author, Arthur Miller? Like, was it set in the 50s? Was it set in the 40s? Was it set in the 30s? When was it supposed to be taking place, right? And see if you can figure that out. Okay, do a little bit of background research on there and see if you can figure that out. Okay. So the character, yeah, go ahead. In the 1940s, yeah. So that's what's good. Okay. So we'll have to maybe, and again, I'm not going to make you write a paper about it, but do a little bit of digging into the cultural context and historical context, just so that you understand the play a little bit. Other questions about the play that other groups had? We've got the suicide. Other questions? That's a really good question. I don't think I have an answer for it. I will say that I know that when my grandfather came back from World War II, my grandmother's told me this my whole life, because I never really knew my grandfather. He died when I was about 2. But when he came back from the war, she said he spent 2 weeks telling her, just talking nonstop about what had happened during the war. He just talked constantly for about 2 weeks. And then after that, he never mentioned it again. Ever. And the wives were told not to ask. Like, don't ask your husbands about it. It was traumatic, leave it alone. That was the advice. Maybe not the best advice, but that was the advice, was to leave it alone. We didn't do a lot of talking about our feelings in this generation. The greatest generation was great at getting stuff done. It was not necessarily talking about your feelings, right? It was suck it up, be a man, kind of atmosphere, right? Let's talk about some of the downsides to a non-feminist enlightened world for men, right? The idea behind feminism is that society will be better when men and women are equal, right? It doesn't mean women are better, and it doesn't mean that only women's lives will improve. The premise really is that both men and women's lives improve when men and women can be equal, right? So when the man is the only provider in a family, that's a tremendous amount of pressure on them alone to provide, right? Which means that they're very often out of the house, managing all the career stress, etc., where the mom is home and dealing with all the home stress, right? They've divided and conquered on the stress, but in some ways, if the economics aren't going well, then the man is left with the feeling of failure to provide, right? That failure to provide is intense, and it has a strong effect on a man's psyche, right? And I think even now there are statistics that say that a lot of domestic abuse cases are in cases where the man is feeling disempowered economically, right? Is feeling like that he's not able to manage the role of provider and is failing at it and is just kind of lashing out, right? So there's a lot of pressure on this guy to provide for his family, to the point where he thinks the family would be better off without him, right? And that's a lot of pressure. Certainly, if he could have said, I need some help with this, he might have gotten it. But that's not the culture we were in, right? All right. So why didn't they talk? Probably because they had no way to talk about it. They weren't a talky kind of family. I mean, yeah, yeah, yeah. We do, but even my parents will consider getting therapy or talking to somebody as a sign of weakness, and it's not. You know, we're working generationally on destigmatizing that idea that getting some psychiatric help or psychological help and support is healthy and important if you're struggling. But there are still issues with that. There are still, and I would say that especially for men, there's a stigma on asking for help with your emotions. For some men, there's a stigma for admitting they have emotions, right? we're still, I mean, we're still working to empower men to admit they have feelings, deal with the feelings, and to be permitted feelings other than anger and happiness, right? Those aren't the only two choices, right? So we're still working on this. At this point in time, we're deep in it. We're deep in an era where you didn't really talk about feeling. I mean, when my grandmother lost a baby when my mom was a little kid, and the adults said to my mom, who was about 9 years old, you need to make sure your mother is not upset. And then like that was it. Like the family didn't get grief counseling, right? They never really talked about it. I mean, my mom and her mother, my mom and my grandmother never talked about that until they were adults. Like they didn't talk about it. They lost a baby and they didn't talk about it. Like it's kind of stunning how different. I mean, Lord, right now, sometimes I feel like we talk about our feelings a little too much. Like we're always about the feelings, right? Like I've literally said to my daughter, you need to have fewer feelings about this, which is not good parenting, probably, but she loses a glove or something. I'm like, no, you need to have fewer feelings about this. Um, but this was a time when like big stuff didn't necessarily get talked about it. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So, other questions about the text? All right. What was the best part? Yes, that's a pivotal moment. And if you're tracing Biff, there's a pivotal moment for Biff, right? Where he stands up to her. I liked that part too. What made you like that? Just kind of happy to see him stand up. Yeah. Yeah, to jump in and defend somebody. Absolutely. Absolutely. Other best parts, other parts that you've identified as the best part? You just, dude. What's a parent's responsibility to keep their kid grounded in reality as opposed to building them up? Like if your kid wants to like try out for a competitive dance team and they're just not that good, what do you do? You won't know when you're a parent either. You're going to be like, I don't know what to do here because, honey, you're not real good at this. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's a parent's job to definitely tell their kid to work at things that are hard for them. I think it's a parent's job to tell them what they're good at and to say, hey, you're really good at this. Did you know that? Do you know how good you are at this over here? I also think it's a parent's job to be realistic when a kid comes home and says, they said I'm not good at singing. And be like, yeah, well, that's not really your thing. I love you, but you can't carry a tune in a bucket. But you're still awesome, right? I mean, are your parents realistic with you about the things that you're good at and not good at? You are a liar, right? Yeah, I mean, my parents were pretty realistic with me about stuff. They were like, well, you're very good at this, but I don't think you're going to make a living at it. So maybe pick something else, right? Which that can be hard. Like when you have a son or a daughter who's a talented actor or singer, but they're not gonna be the next superstar, right? They're gonna need a backup plan, or they're gonna be a waitress forever, right? I mean, and that's tough. Like there's that, yes, go for it, push for your dreams, also have a backup plan. Anybody's parents give them one of those? Push for the dreams, but have a backup plan? It's good to have a backup plan. I'm on like plan Q over here. There's plan A, plan B. I don't know. I'm on plan S or something, but I'm happy, right? All of the plans are a way to pivot when one thing, one path dead ends and you go, okay, now what? What am I going to do next? Right? Um, and I think I think our main character has gotten to a place where he can't pivot anymore. He doesn't know what to do next, right? All right. Do the sons feel like they're at a place where they don't know what to do next, or do they still have the opportunity to make something of themselves? Yeah, and hey, it's not over till the fat lady sings, right? I have students who come back to Lawson who are older than these young, than these men who are shifting careers. They had a job, they want to switch. They come back to school to get a different degree and go in a different direction, and it's awesome. And they inspire me every day, those students who are shifting their goals from what they've been doing to what they'd like to do next. And those are some of my favorite students, the students who are like, well, I've done this and now I'm sick of it, or it bottomed out, that industry isn't a thing anymore. Right? But I'm serious, like when the steel mills closed in Birmingham, Lawson had a little influx of men who had been working at that steel plant who needed to pivot. They needed to do something else, and they came to Lawson to get degrees to go do something else, right? Because chasing steel mills around the country at this point is kind of a losing proposition, right? If you've been working in coal and we're going toward green energy, you're going to need to pivot. You're going to need to switch. And I always argue that education is the thing that gives you the most mobility in life, right? The most ability to pivot. And these men have that. They can go do that, right? Other best moments in this play. Okay, worst moments then. The worst moments in this play. Yeah, there's a lot of emotional content in this play. There's a lot in it. There's a lot of anger in it, a lot of unhappiness in it. Yep, that was a rough passage. Any other worst moments? That was a really frustrating moment. I kind of wanted to shake him. Like, what are you doing? You just got offered a job. Take the job. Why do you think he doesn't take? You thought he just didn't quite understand what was happening, or that was a weird moment. Did other people have responses to that moment in the play? Have a sense of what was going on there? Insights on that? Pride. Yeah, we had a lot of issues with pride. Pride. Yeah. So yeah, it's put yourself in his position though, right? There's a person you've been competing with your whole life, and now your opportunity has bottomed out, and now your only opportunity is to go work for them. I mean, think about the person you feel the most rivalry with right now. Like the person where you're just always kind of like, well, I got that and you didn't. And then they're like, oh, yeah, well, I mean, we always have these people. We always have the people where you're like, you feel competitive with them. Yes. How many of you have somebody you feel competitive with? Even though you try not to, you feel competitive with them. Sibling or a peer at school or somebody on your team who always gets the position you want to play, or right? I mean, there's always somebody that you feel that competitiveness with, a little bit of resentment when they do better than you. Mm, do we have? We do. You have those people, and now you've got to go work for them. Sound good? No, it sounds horrible. Could you bring yourself to do it? Daniel's like, no. But Daniel, your family depends upon it. Does it? It does, but it does. I mean, Macy, you're shaking your head. You're like, no. It's really hard if you really think about that person that you would just, oh my Lord, now I have to ask you for a job. And you know who those people are. You will gather them in life as you go, the people you would never agree to ask them for a job, right? Um, and and now he's in that position and he really doesn't feel like he can take it. It's a hard moment though because you feel like he could have solved his problems if he had swallowed his pride. Yeah, that was horrendous. The funeral for me was the worst part because it was so depressing. Um, did that hit anybody else as just really awful? I mean, funerals are awful anyway, but they're supposed to be like a celebration of your life, and this was just awful. There was nobody there, and it wasn't because of COVID. Like there was nobody there. And that's okay. Other worst moments that we had with the play. Okay, what do we like about the play in general? Yeah, there's a lot of depth below what's being said. The things, and I think this is something to keep in mind as you're writing, that the analysis after your quotes is going to have to be substantial here because a lot of times the quote is there and then there's like a lot of subtext that you're going to have to explain, right? So he might just be saying, I can't work for you, and you're going to have to explain the dynamic there, right? So it's going to make, when you're doing that close reading to show that shift in that person, you might not find the way you did with the poetry or the way you did with the short story, that sentence that sums it all up really beautifully. You may have to take a sentence and then really fill in what's going on behind that, really explain, because you're doing a lot of reading between the lines. You're doing a lot of understanding the emotions of the actors that are behind what they say, independently of what's in the text. As Riley was saying, the text is fairly simple, but what the meaning is behind it is pretty deep. And it's you that's filling that in. So when you're writing your essay, you're going to have to, it's that job of analyzing the quotes becomes much more important, because you've really got to guide us in understanding that subtext and understanding what's packed into that fairly simple quote. Does that make sense? All right. Let's take a second, do a screen share and walk through this week's work together, just so that we can see everything together, make sure everybody knows what's going on. All right, so we are in week 14 this week out of 15. So let me talk about the calendar for a minute. We have this week, and then what's next week? Yes, take a break, please. Lawson gives its students a week off at Thanksgiving. You have the whole week. We don't meet Monday. We don't meet Wednesday. Okay, so next week you have it off. The faculty are doing faculty development things, and you are enjoying yourselves. Okay, but we have an essay due. Yay, essay due. Okay, don't make it harder than it is. And on Wednesday, we're going to go over these handouts for quoting and citing drama, but we have them there. You have a criterion link to use criterion for this. This is a character analysis. This is deciding which character to follow. I'll go over the instructions with you again. Just make sure you're understanding it. And I'll update the due date. Upload a Word or PDF file containing your character analysis essay. All essays should be 750 to 1200 words and a minimum of 5 paragraphs. Your essays may be longer than 5 paragraphs if that works for you. Please don't feel restricted to that. If you've got a paragraph that's taking up more than a page, split it into 2, right? This isn't the standard 101 5-paragraph essay. Although it follows the same structure, you've got a thesis, you back it up with some support, and you wrap it up, okay? But if you need 3 paragraphs, great. If you need 6 paragraphs instead of 5, that's fine. It's your body paragraph. Just make sure you don't have like 2 conclusions. Okay. Your thesis should assert that one character in the play Death of a Salesman has changed in a particular and significant way through the course of the play. Each paragraph should have no fewer than 3 quotes from the play. That's the middle paragraphs, each body paragraph. The thesis and concluding paragraph should be quote-free. Those should be all your own thoughts. If you want to use longer passage, break it up into smaller portions with your analysis between each quote, and be sure to provide an in-text citation at the end of every sentence that contains a quote. This essay does not require additional research, but if you consult a source to help you in your reading, that source must be acknowledged through a source introduction, quotation, and citation at the end of the essay. If you use only the play, a single citation should be provided. Please use the handout for the citation. There will be a handout. If you consulted other texts, please include them in the works cited list. Let's get the due date to be correct. And it's not April. We will have a work cited list unless you use others, but you'll just need to quote, because you need to cite the play, right? But only the play, and it's a PDF, and we know how to do a PDF. So that's due Sunday. Remember, it can be a 5-paragraph essay. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. You're tracing how this character develops. And it should be your only assignment. I didn't have you do a discussion board and a quiz this week. I should have week 13's, you had your outline uploaded, and I should have feedback before the end of the week on those outlines. I'm going to tell you this, I am a little behind on grading because the kid got sick on Friday, and I got to spend all day cleaning up puke. So that was fun. I didn't get any grading done on Friday, so I am a little bit behind on that, but I'll catch up tonight and tomorrow. And by the end of the day tomorrow, I hope to be caught up. Okay. So that's week 14. That's all there is. On Wednesday, we're going to go over the quoting and citing. I'd like you to start and start seeing what the problems are that you might have. But let's just quickly look at this handout to make sure that, okay, so what do you have here? You have the citation. It's right here for you. Arthur Miller, Death of a Salesman, 1959, Arizona Actors Academy, 31 March 20, accessed, and then you'll have to update that the date accessed. But you've got the information you need for the citation right there. Download the file. And there's a video that goes over this handout as well, so make sure you do watch that instructional video. I'll go over it, but it gives you, sorry, I keep moving us. It gives you a passage from the text, and then it shows you how that will look when you're quoting from that passage, so that you can see how it changes. So in the sample you have, let me make it a little bigger. In the sample, you have the topic sentence in orange, source quotations in blue, quote integration in green, citation in red, and analysis in purple. So again, source introduction is where you give the background that we need, the context to understand the quotes that you're about to use. Don't say in Act 2. Nobody has this memorized by act and scene number. If I said to you what happens in Act 3, Scene 2 of Hamlet, you're going to have no idea, right? If I ask you what happens when Claudius is praying, you're going to know that Hamlet thinks about killing him while he's praying, right? So give that context instead of the numbers, okay? So it just walks you through how to do that. It just shows you passage. And then again, there's a video that walks you through the changes that you're seeing. So just quickly, here's the quote integration for, it says, Biff asks his father, comma, quote, did you see the new football I got, with the page number and then the question mark. And that's this line, Biff, colon, did you see the new football I got, question mark. So I took the Biff colon out and instead did Biff asks his father. Okay, so we're not, please don't copy and paste these lines into your text and then just you don't keep the name and the colon in there when you quote, you take those out. You'll also see that I take out any stage directions and replace them with my own words saying how the person was feeling and that sort of thing. So you're taking out the stage directions, you're taking and replacing them with your own explanation. You're taking out the happy colon things that indicate who's talking, and you're replacing those with happy argues, comma, quote. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so there's a sample of what it ought to look like, a sample of what the text looks like, just so that you can kind of see them next to each other and see how it changes from the way it looks in the text to the way it looks when you're quoting it. Okay, and once again, there is a video going over this. The quoting drama tutorial is there for you. Okay. All right. Questions about this week's work? I want to remind you that although we've taken a lot of time with our other essays, you've been writing 3 paragraphs a week in a heartbeat, and this is only 2 more than that, right? So breathe. Don't make it harder than it is. We did the last essay in pieces because it was so hard and it was so long, but this doesn't need to take that long. You know how to do this. Crank it out. Okay? Remember, if you do need to break it into pieces, draft one paragraph a day, and then at the end of the week, you'll have them put together. Draft a paragraph today, draft a paragraph tomorrow, and then by the weekend, you'll have them put together. And it should only take you 10 to 15 minutes to draft a paragraph. Just break it up into pieces if you need to, okay? All right, I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to stop the recording and we'll go into workshop mode.